Perfect. And so welcome everybody to our Introduction to Debate Seminar 2022. It is so good to see you virtually and to kick off our best 2022-2023 season. So my name is Julia Lynch and I am the debate coordinator for the BEST Foundation. I've been in this role for since last year, and it has been an awesome opportunity to meet so many amazing students and get to do what I love most, which is talk about debate. A little bit about me. So I am currently an English teaching assistant in Dobrich and also the coach of our team, Go Dobrich Rats, of course. I also am the former debate captain and competitor at the University of Miami, where I did a lot of debate and was able to compete all across the country and even across the pond in Europe a couple times, which was super fun. So I've been involved in debate for probably almost 8 years at this point, and I still coach and judge here and there for some American programs back at home. But I am very excited to do so much work with the BEST Foundation. So some goals that I have for this year for debate and the debate program are to continue to grow and improve the debate program and its quality. Last year, we saw such a huge growth in our program. I think we were like over 68% of growth in participation rates, which was awesome. And our debaters were really advancing and getting a lot better and more comfortable in debates, which is awesome. I'm also hoping to offer more opportunities for you all to compete internationally. We are sending a team to an international tournament hosted in Qatar just next month, which is going to be awesome. And as always, to continue providing more debate resources and training materials with seminars such as this one and materials online. So today we have a pretty simple schedule. We're going to talk a little bit about debate at BEST and what we do here. And then we'll go into the basics of argumentation, which builds debate, moving into debate itself. And then as we have time, talk a little bit about the type of debate that we do at tournaments. If at any point you have a question, I'm going too fast, you want me to repeat something, please feel free to raise your hand or literally put something in the chat or verbally interrupt me at any point. I'll be happy to answer your questions. As I mentioned, this is being recorded, so you can always double check our YouTube channel later to catch up on something that you've missed. So let's get started talking about debate at BEST. So what is debate? Basically, straightforward, in an academic debate, it's basically an activity where two sides participate in a structured discussion about a specific topic. So it's not just arguing with your brother across the kitchen table, but there are specific roles and responsibilities that each speaker has to do in order to make it a structured debate where we can really talk about an issue and whether or not, or about how we want to go about it. Throughout the debate, teams present clear arguments for or against the topic, regardless of their personal opinions. So you will probably find that you are going to have to be proposing or defending something that maybe you don't personally believe in, but it's still important to have these discussions regardless. And at the end of the debate, an objective judge decides the winner and gives feedback, which is always great. The benefits of debate, oh my gosh, so many. One, it helps us to gain knowledge of world issues and current events that we might not otherwise think of. For everybody, especially people whose first language is not English, it will significantly improve your English speaking, communication, and probably writing skills. It'll help you to develop critical and analytical thinking skills so that you can start thinking through problems in a clearer and better way. It'll help with your research abilities. And since it is a team event, you learn how to effectively work with the team. And again, since you're competing against each other teams, you also get to learn how to respect and understand others' viewpoints. All things that will help you to be successful no matter what you do in the world. And at best, we follow the World Schools debate format, which we'll talk more about later. At the tournaments, we have 4 preliminary rounds that every student competes in. A round is basically 1 debate. And then at the end of the tournament, we have 1 final round for the top teams in each division. This year, like we did starting at the beginning in January and maybe in previous years, we will have separate novice and varsity divisions, which means students that are in 8th and 9th grade, you will only be competing against other students in 8th and 9th grade. That way, if you're new to debate or maybe you're not super confident in your English skills, have no fear, because you are also going to be competing against people at your age group. For older students, all students will compete in the varsity division, which is open to 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And the good news is that you get a chance to work with your team to prepare some debate topics in advance, and others you will work with your team to prepare for at the tournament itself. We'll talk more about that later. And debate has been such a great community here at the Best Foundation. Here are some pictures from our summer camp, which we held in August, where we had 30 students from all over Bulgaria come join us in Lozin outside of Sofia for a week-long sleepaway camp experience where we did so much debating. I hope they come back. We had so much fun, and this is just one chance or opportunity that you can think of in the future to join us in if you're interested in getting more knowledgeable, better at debate, and also making a great group of friends. It was so much fun. Okay. That is my very brief introduction to debate and debate at Best's. Pausing here if anyone has any questions. Perfect. Then let's jump into it and get into the nitty-gritty, starting with argumentation. You might notice the key main word or root word being argue. And what I like to say is that when most people think of the word argue or argument, they think of something like this: yelling around a table or arguing with a friend or coworker, yelling at your sibling, or just thinking, no matter what, I am right, despite maybe the other person thinking that as well. But today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what arguments mean in the context of debate and how we can make good arguments to help support our position. So, what is an argument? An argument is a set of statements that you use to try to convince people that your opinion about something is correct. So, it's not just a single sentence, but a complete thought or idea that's supported by stuff called evidence or reasoning to help explain what your argument is, why it's true, and why it matters. And when we think of the types of arguments that we make in debate, we look to some old philosopher named Aristotle, maybe you've heard of him, who talks about the different ways we can make persuasive arguments. And he isolates it into these 3 categories. Don't memorize them. And maybe some of you might have heard them in school or in other classes before. But just to give you an idea of the types of arguments we make, here are these 3 categories that he outlines. Let's start in the middle with pathos or pathos, not sure how it's pronounced. And these are emotional arguments, arguments you make to connect with somebody else on an emotional level to make them feel something, feel angry, feel excited, feel upset, feel curious. These arguments are probably most commonly what you might be used to. Other types of arguments that we use in debate are logical arguments, attacking that logos side, which are where we use types of reasoning that would make, A leads to B leads to C. So the idea that because of these things that we have said are true, or because of this instance or this example, therefore my opinion on this topic is correct. So building up a logical chain of reasoning to persuade someone to believe what you're saying. And the last one all the way over here on the left is called ethos, which is basically your credibility. So maybe you're not making an explicit argument, but it's an argument that's made just by you being you, and you being a speaker or a person that seems like they know what they're talking about and is credible in making the claims that they do. One way that I tried to establish my ethos at the beginning of this presentation was by telling you a little bit about myself and my background in debate, so that you kind of say, okay, maybe I should probably listen to what she's saying because she probably has some experience to lend credibility to her positions and her explanations here in this seminar. So let's look at an argument and I try to isolate them into 3 parts so that we can break it down so that every time we go to make an argument, we follow this structure so that it's clear, easy, and understandable. The first part of the argument is the claim. The second is the warrant, and the third is the impact, the claim, warrant, impact model. We'll talk a little bit about what these mean and look at some examples, and then you'll get to try it out. So the claim. This is what we usually think of when we think of an argument. It's what you're trying to prove. For people that have written essays or made persuasive speeches, this is also kind of like a thesis statement, the general idea that you are trying to prove. Next is the warrant. This is the why of the argument. It's what supports your claim through things like evidence from news articles, research, personal examples, or other things that you could find that support your claim and explain why it's correct. Why is your argument true? And lastly is the impact. This is the broader meaning of the argument and something that debaters most likely forget. This is why explaining why what you're saying is important. I like to use these little models where we say that the claim, you start with this phrase, I think that blank, because blank, this is important because blank. And when you're debating, I encourage you to use these phrases because it helps to force you to provide all of these parts of the argument. And it also signals to those around you that you are knowledgeable of how to make an argument and hitting all the right points. Okay, let's look at an example. So again, the claim, what you're trying to prove. Here I have my claim. Let me go spotlight here. Here I have the claim that students should only attend school for half the day on Wednesdays. That is what I'm trying to prove. Next, I have my warrant, which is the why. A break during the week allows students to restore energy, catch up on schoolwork, and prepare for upcoming assignments and exams. And lastly, the impact, the why. Why does it matter? This is important because students need to have the best opportunity to learn and perform well so they can be successful in university and the workplace. Kind of makes sense? Okay. Questions on this before I give you a chance to practice and get practice. Okay, now it's your turn. Grab a piece of paper or your phone, and I am going to ask that you use this claim, warrant, impact model to generate arguments either in support of or against the phrase, school uniforms should be mandatory in all high school classrooms. So thinking when you're doing this, you can be using this as, I'm going to put it in the chat. I believe, or I think that, your phrase, because blank, this is important because blank. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to think through this. You can either say, yes, I support this, or no, I don't support this, and try to follow that claim, warrant, impact model that I just taught you. Afterwards, I'm going to ask some people to share. When you're ready, give me a thumbs up, or you can put your hand up if you want to share. Okay, do I have any brave volunteers that would like to share their thoughts?
Can I share?
Please, go ahead.
Okay, so I think that uniforms in all high schools should be mandatory because it's a way of representing the school. Because they are mandatory, people might not like them, but might make the school seem more classy. This is important because if the uniforms are comfortable, there is no reason not to wear them. Also, getting up in the morning and putting a uniform on and not thinking what to wear is also a great thing.
Woo! Thank you so much, Dennis. That was awesome. Honestly, you might have had like 2 or 3 great arguments in there, but what I really, really appreciate there is that you were using those phrases. I heard, "I believe that because this is important," which was great. Also, I have been using this example with many, many students, and that's the first one where I heard about school spirit, so clever argument. Anybody else wanna share? Okay, no pressure. There's gonna be another chance for you to do it. We'll take a look at what my example was. So I said, I forgot my phrases, sorry. I said, I think that school uniforms should be mandatory in all high schools because they are better for student mental health. This is because uniforms lessen the chances of students getting bullied for what they wear. And this is important because victims of bullying suffer from trauma and social isolation that can cause long-term damage. Dennis had his ready phrases much better than me. So another example of how we could do it. Okay, questions about how to make an argument or why. Awesome, let's move on then. Talking again, going back to the bigger picture about debate. So we already talked about debate and how it's an organized activity in which two sides participate in a specific discussion. How do we prepare for a debate? Here is the general structure that is used no matter what type of debate you're doing. Generally, you start by researching the topic. So trying to understand what it means and what topics, what arguments or things are being said about it. This can be done by just thinking personally, what do I think about this opinion? This topic, maybe asking family and friends, and most likely using Google or other resources to look into the topic to see what is being said about it and what potential arguments could be made. Then you go to brainstorm to arguments that would support your side of the debate. Then, somewhere in the middle of this, you try to anticipate what the other people are going to say, what the opponent's arguments are going to be, so that in step 4, when you put your arguments together, you're having a super well-rounded set of arguments, which we call a case, to support your side and kind of be the best prepared against what your opponents are going to say. Then you practice, whether that's individually or as a team, and then you have the debate and you feel great because you've given an awesome speech and shown off what you learned. Now we're going to watch an example debate, which is not exactly like what we're going to be doing at best, but to give you an idea of how a typical debate would run, and you can see kind of how arguments are being made. So what I'd like you to do as we watch this debate is to, one, try to identify what arguments are being made by each speaker, and two, if there are any phrases that they're using that sound kind of debatey. So debatey, what do I mean by that? Trying to say, the phrase, "I believe that," or "while I understand his opinion, my position is," or other phrases that show that they are trying to make an argument and be persuasive. So we'll watch part of it, and then we will pause, kind of have a discussion, and watch the end. This topic, which might sound kind of strange to Bulgarian students, but is a very popular issue in American high schools and kind of rounds out with our school uniform debate, is whether or not students should be allowed to wear hoodies in classrooms. And these are sweatshirts that have hoods on that kids, play with or hide under or put their headphones in and then cover them up with their hood. In America, shockingly, a lot of schools do not let students wear hoodies. So we're going to watch what the opinions are on both sides of this so that you can get a chance to see what an example debate looks like and get an idea for what type of language you can be using. I'm gonna hit play. If you can't hear it, please tell me in the chat so we can fix it.
All right, so what Ms. Payne and I are going to do is we are going to do a little demonstration about the format for what a class debate looks like that you can help follow for Tuesday. So we decided we're going to do a really quick debate on whether or not hooded sweatshirts should be allowed in school. I will be the pro side arguing in favor of, Ms. Payne will be the con side arguing against. So your opening statement is when you first talk about your topic, you make your initial point. So for example, you introduce yourself. So my name is Mr. Bugie, and I believe that sweatshirts should be allowed in school for the following reasons. While it is true that sweatshirts can be baggy and that at times people think that sometimes students could be carrying things and they're not paying attention, nonetheless, as students go throughout our building, it oftentimes gets a great temperature shift from being really cold to really hot. And if we allow students to have sweatshirts, even ones with hoods, it allows them to have the opportunity to be warm in classes that it's cold in, to feel comfortable in classes that it's not. And just because it has a hood doesn't mean anything, as long as we just make sure that the hood actually stays off their head. Now what Ms. Payne will do is she will represent the con portion. So her opening statement will be a disagreement with that.
Hi, I'm Ms. Payne, and I disagree and believe that hoodies should not be worn in school. And the reason being is because they present a safety issue. And the reason for that is because, one, the hoods, when walking through the hall, many kids decide that they think it would be funny to yank on the back of the hoods and then causing someone to be choked. Two, in this day and age, safety is a big concern, especially with all of the violence in schools, and hoodies can be very large and many things can be hidden inside the hoodies. So that's a huge safety concern.
So the next portion.
Okay, so we heard the opening statements from both sides. Can anybody share what are some of the arguments that you heard from them in either support or against this topic?
To be honest, I support both sides.
Okay. What was
I really liked the one where he said that if you are cold, you can wear hoodies. That was a really good point.
Love it. Awesome. Thank you. Somebody else, maybe? What was an argument that she made that Miss Payne made?
That somebody can yank on the back of the hood of somebody or and then someone might choke or they could hide something inside of it.
Perfect. Thank you, Dennis. Okay, yes, exactly. So they both presented arguments in support of their side. What happens next is called the rebuttal, or the opportunity for each side to answer the arguments made by the other side and kind of refute them. So we'll watch that and we'll watch the closing and then we'll chat again. I have to find it now.
Two, the concern.
So the next portion of the debate is going to be the rebuttal. So we've each made our initial case, and now what we're going to do is we are going to argue against what the other person said. And when we do that, we want to make sure that we acknowledge their point of view, but at the same time, we want to put a disagreement with that. So for example, Ms. Payne has stated that students in the hallway can grab and choke a student. Well, students in the hallway can grab any article of clothing a student's wearing. Simply having a hood isn't going to make a difference. Also, you've allowed one or two students who decide to make a bad decision to impact the entire grade, and in no part of a school atmosphere should we punish everybody because of something that one person has done. Now, in terms of hiding and bringing materials into school, students can do that any number of ways. We're not searching every student's backpack. We're not going through every folder when a kid walks through the class. Why should we naturally assume that students are going to bring things into school that they don't? So that's my rebuttal to her opening statement. She now provides a rebuttal to the statements that I have made so far.
And so what I would say is, well, you make valid points, but that's why we set very strict dress code rules, and we state them very clearly in our dress code policy. And so we should, as a district, state that you need to wear this and that and make it very clear in what you're going to wear. And so that there is no misunderstanding and that you can see what students are wearing. You shouldn't be wearing loose baggy pants. You shouldn't be wearing loose baggy shirts. And so that you can't hide things in your clothing. Now, if we do have, you said we can hide things in their backpacks. If we have the suspicion that someone is hiding something, we do have a right as the school to search someone's backpack. So safety is still a concern. Now, the point that you made about ripping anybody's article of clothing, that's why we have teachers in the hallways, but the hoods make it a little bit easier to choke someone.
So in this case, we've both provided a rebuttal. The last portion of this is our closing statement. The closing statement has been to basically just sum up your point of view really quickly. You want to hit one or two key points and then you're done. So my closing statement is while you've heard two arguments, one for hoodies and one against, ultimately at the end of the day, I believe that allowing hoodies in school allows students to feel comfortable in classrooms. It allows students the opportunity to express themselves in ways that they might other not, and the safety concerns that my opponent has brought up, while realistic, are minimal at best, and thus are not ones that belong in this debate whatsoever. And that's why I believe that we should allow hoodies to be in school.
My closing argument would be, while hoodies are comfortable, and I do like them myself, there's a time and place for hoodies. I think students have many other options that they can wear to school that would be just as comfortable, like a cute cardigan of the color that they need, a sweatshirt without a hood. There are many other options that can be even more fashionable than the sweatshirt with a hood. And so I feel like there are many other options that students can wear that are more safe and secure in the school environment.
And so ultimately what happens is at the end of the debate, you have a vote amongst the class.
Okay, so we saw, turn on my camera. Okay, so we saw the rebuttal statements and the closing statements. Can anybody identify any types of language that the debaters were using that kind of signaled that it was a debate and helped to make their points more persuasive? You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute and share it. So phrases or statements they were using to help make their side more persuasive. I need like game show music. Dennis, you're gonna go again?
I mean, they use debate as like examples, like when one side expresses their opinion, the other side says something along the lines of, well, reasoning your opinion might something is, and then he shows his side.
Yes, very good. It identifies exactly what the other team is saying, and then kind of rebuts it or makes that direct rebuttal. I see Nika says, while I think that's true, this is also a very, very good debate tactic by saying, well, maybe what you're saying is right. That doesn't mean that your side still wins. So good point, Nika. Anybody else want to add something before we move on? Okay. So that was an example of how a very simple debate might look like, but because you guys are so awesome and so smart, unfortunately, we're going to make it a little bit more complicated and a little bit longer. So I'm going to tell you now a little bit about the World Schools debate format that we use here at BEST. So World School Debate is actually a debate style that's made particularly for high school students. So it is supposed to be accessible and a fun way for you to debate. It is also competed in around the world. So there are so many opportunities for us to compete with other students from other countries in this same style of debate that we use. And it is a mix of prepared and impromptu motions, which we will talk about later. If you're ever looking for more information, tips, resources, or examples, if you search World Schools Debate either in Google or on YouTube, you will find a gazillion resources to help you. So that's very good news. At the debate tournaments, which we'll talk about, which this year are in November for starting with the Fall West, I think the second weekend, and Fall East on the last weekend of November, you'll see that we have 5 total debate rounds. There are 2 prepared debates, which are the debates in which you know what the topic is beforehand. About a month before the tournament, we publish at best what specific motions or topics you will be debating, and you have a chance to prepare with your teams for both sides of the debate, depending on which one you get at the tournament. There are also 2 impromptu rounds, which are a little bit different because you don't know what topic you're going to be debating until maybe 30 minutes or an hour before the round. So what this requires you to do is to work with your team to come up with arguments quickly and still in a structured manner. So as I said earlier, each debate team will compete in all 4 rounds of these preliminary rounds. And then the top 2 teams from each division will compete in the final round. And for people that were here last year, or maybe if you want to start whispering to your team, this year, the final round will be impromptu. And just in case anybody here has competed before, this is so that students don't have to prepare for a motion they're likely not going to debate, and so that our debaters get an extra challenge before the final round. I'm not sure if I mentioned this, I've done this presentation a bunch, but yes, I did say that there are separate novice and varsity divisions. So the 8th and 9th graders will debate on one against teams that are also in 8th and 9th grade, and then students that are older all debate against each other. But all of the motions for both divisions are the same. So round 1 will be the same debate topic for each debate. At the end, we will give awards to the top 5 teams and the top 5 individual speakers to kind of recognize who did really well at the tournament. Oh, questions about how this works at the tournament? Okay, then let's talk about the basics of World Schools Debate. As I mentioned, that there are 2 teams competing against each other, and each team is made up of 3 debaters or speakers. Actually, though, and something that, again, if you were here last year, what we're going to continue from nationals is that technically your debate team can be made up of between 3 and 5 students, but each debate, only 3 of the people that are on your team will actually participate in the debate and speak. The other 2 will observe, but they can't help. So this is so that maybe someone wants a break, or maybe you have 4 people that are interested in debate, but you don't have 5 or another 2 people to make up a whole team, so that your whole, everyone in your school that wants to debate can. So some teams will be made up of 3 people, others 4, and maybe more, even 5. It's totally up to you, your coach, and your school to find what fits for you. There are advantages and disadvantages to having more or less people, so it's totally up to you all how you want to do that, so long as that during during each debate, only 3 people are the ones that are actually doing the debating, helping each other out. During the debate, there are 8 speeches in total, 4 on each side, and the debate is about a topic which are called motions. You can think of the motion like you're in Parliament and you motion to do something, you suggest to do something. That's where we get this phrase, because this type of debate is what we call parliamentary style, which is kind of based on parliament and government procedures. You'll notice here that here's an example, a little graphic of, the 3 people on one side competing against the 3 people on the other. And here in bold, we have an example of a motion, which that is, this House would create quotas for women in high public offices. You'll see this interesting phrase, this House. This is something that we use in this style of debate to kind of just start off each motion. Don't read too much into it. Basically, how I would interpret this motion is we should create quotas for women in high public offices, which just means we should make it so that a certain number of women must be in positions of public office. So there has to be a certain number. Always go off at like this time of night, so my Wi-Fi cut out, but we'll pick back up where I think we left off. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I think I was just talking about this motion and kind of how we would interpret or debate it. So as I mentioned, you'll see this phrase, this house, which kind of just, you could put in the idea that it means like we or the government or some sort of governing body that's going to make a decision should or would do something. We'll talk more about that later. It's kind of just a technicality. So when I would be reading this motion and trying to understand what it means, it basically is saying that we should create quotas for women in high public offices, which basically just means we should set a specific number of seats available only for women in places like parliament, the judiciary, other important areas that are public offices. So just an example topic, not something that you will be debating necessarily. Okay, questions about these basics of the format or anything you'd like me to repeat? Okay, let's talk a little bit more about motions, the topics of the debate. Motions in World Schools debate should be interpreted reasonably, with arguments discussing the core of the controversy areas. What this means is that when you read a motion, you should be thinking about what are the most reasonable or main core issues of controversy or disagreement with this motion. We're not trying to make specifics or saying or proving that one instance of a case is true and therefore we should win. It's looking at the big picture. Yes, we support this idea. No, we don't support this idea for whatever reasons. As I mentioned, the prepared motions are given about a month in advance. So our prepared motions will be released either tomorrow or Saturday, just depending on how the technical side of things work. These are more research oriented. Because you have so much time to prepare, you should be researching, talking to people, brainstorming lots of arguments to put together a very, very well-rounded, well-researched set of arguments or a case. And typically, they might have more statistics and evidence to support your side. Impromptu motions are the ones that you get right before the debate themselves. And you'll have between 30 and 60 minutes to prepare. I put 30 to 60 because we traditionally at best have only given 30 minutes to prepare, but we are trying to allow for more time for students to prepare, probably around 45 minutes, but we have to fix the schedule or see if it fits in the schedule. So at a minimum, you will have 30 minutes to prepare. At a maximum, you'll have 60, and you'll definitely know before you go into the tournament which it will be. For the impromptu motions, when you're preparing for the debate, you will not be allowed to use the internet or any other outside sources. So you and your teammates, the people that are actually a part of your debate team, not your entire school, but the debate team itself, so that's either you and your 2, 3, or 4 other teammates, can work to prepare, brainstorm, and put together arguments for the debate, but you can't use any outside help. These are more value-oriented. Is something a good idea or not? We're not going to give you a very, very specific policy and tell you, I expect that you know about it. This is something that without almost any other information, which you won't have, besides just being reasonably knowledgeable about things that are happening in the world, you'll feel comfortable and confident in debating. They are a little bit tricky, but in other lectures, and your coaches can share with you, there's a structure that you can use to help you prepare for the debates. Questions about these motions? Okay, let's talk about some key terms. The 2 key terms regarding the names of the teams are the proposition and the opposition. The proposition is the name of the team that supports the motion. They are proposing that the motion be accepted. So they're the ones that say yes, we agree with this idea. And the opposition naturally is the one that opposes the motion or says that no, this isn't a good idea. The proposition is wrong. You'll sometimes see these abbreviated as prop and op, or even sometimes as the proposition being called the government. Don't worry about it. We will figure it out, and your coaches will help you as well. In a debate, the prop team's goal is to prove the motion. They are trying to prove that the motion is a good idea in a majority of circumstances or instances. The opposition team's goal is to disprove what the proposition is saying. So likely this means that no, it is not, the motion is not true or a good idea in a majority of instances, and the things that the proposition are saying are not right. Here is an overview for what the speaking order looks like in the debate. So you'll notice here that the proposition and the proposition starts and ends the debate. We start over here with the first proposition speaker, and then we alternate back and forth. So it goes just like we saw in that practice debate, where it's proposition, opposition, proposition, opposition, yada, yada, yada. But what you'll notice is that something kind of weird happens, where towards the end of the debate, the opposition team speaks twice in a row. And this is because we like to say that the proposition gets the last word. So the person that speaks, that gives the third speech on the opposition, is probably trying to say things that are different than what the opposition reply speaker will say, which we'll talk about later. So we will see up here that the first three speeches for each side, we call these constructive speeches, because they are where you are constructing or building a majority of your arguments. These speeches are 8 minutes long, which can kind of seem long at first, but after you get the hang of it, you will think that it is not nearly long enough. So each team will, as I said, 3 people participate in the debate. So each person will take one of these speeches, first, second, or third. And then the last 2 speeches in the debate, the reply speeches, these have to be given by somebody that's already spoken before, right? Because there's only 3 people and 4 speeches. So for these speeches, either the first or the second speaker is able to give the reply speech. And that's just so that this third speaker potentially, so for example, this opposition speaker doesn't just speak for a really, really long time. The reply speeches are 4 minutes long, so they're shorter, and they're kind of just a chance for you to summarize the debate and explain why you've won. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. So the most important things to know is that each person will give 1 constructive speech, which is 8 minutes long, and either the first or the second speaker from each team, up to you to decide, will give the reply speech, which is the shorter 4-minute speech. The speeches generally alternate between each side until we get to this third opposition speech, where the opposition reply speaker goes immediately after the third opposition speaker. Questions about this structure? Okay. Don't feel the need to read and write everything down that I have here, but just to give you an idea of how the debate flows and how it happens, what happens throughout the debate, we'll see here that each speech has a specific responsibility to fulfill. The first proposition, this 8-minute speech, needs to introduce the topic, define key terms, which means kind of talk about what the important words in the resolution are and what they mean, and then offer 1 or 2 arguments to support their side. The first opposition speech is actually pretty similar, but in talking about the same things. They agree or disagree with the definitions of key terms, and then they clash with the proposition arguments, which means that they respond to them, like we saw in that mini debate. And then they get a chance to offer their own independent arguments. So what you see here is that they make a bunch of arguments, right? They talk about why what the proposition team said was incorrect, wrong, or maybe missed something. And then they get to talk about why generally they think that their side is correct. The second speeches have a very similar structure in that they first rebut or argue against what the most recent speaker from the other side said. Then they get to defend the arguments that their partner brought up in their last speech. So they remind the judge what the arguments were that their partner brought up in the first speech, why they're great. Maybe they answer some of what the other team said. And then they get a chance to offer completely new arguments to still support their side. This happens for both the second proposition and the second opposition speakers. And then we move into what we call the back half or the second half of the debate. And this is where things kind of start to get smaller. So in the first half of the debate, both teams have a lot of really, really good ideas. They have a lot of things to present in support of their side. Once we hit the third speeches, this is where we want to kind of narrow the debate or make it smaller and clearer about where the teams are directly interacting or clashing against each other and why their side is still winning. So what we like to say in the third speeches is that the team should clash and summarize key issues, identifying how the other team's arguments line up with theirs and explaining why their side is correct. There's a specific formula for this, and there's actually a whole nother hour-length lecture about what each speech has, what each person does during each speech that I will link to you all later. After these third speeches is time for the reply speech, where these are again, 4-minute short speeches that the debater tries to offer a summary of the round and explain why their team has won the debate. Good news is that on Monday at 8 p.m., so in just a couple days, our resident reply speaker expert, Borko, will be giving a mini lecture about how to best do this, so you can get a better idea. But generally, we like to think of nothing has been said, it starts off with obviously nothing has been said at the beginning of the debate. Both teams introduce a bunch of arguments and start to interact with each other. Then in the second half of the debate, they try to make the debate pretty narrow and smaller so that they can clearly identify the main issues of the debate, so that by the end of the debate in the reply speeches, there's a clear summary and explanation for why each team has won. Any questions? You can also feel free to put questions in the chat if you're not super interested in being vocal. Okay, the natural question that I get next always is, what about interacting with the other team? I want to ask them the questions that are gonna really prove that they're wrong. When can I do that? Well, in this type of debate, we do that through things called points of information. And these are a little bit weird. Basically, what happens in debate is that while one person is giving their speech, the other team can stand up and actually interrupt them in a specific way to ask a question or make a statement that goes against what the speaker is saying. So how this would work is in the first proposition speech, maybe someone says something that doesn't make too much sense, or they're making a claim without a warrant. They're making a claim but don't have any evidence to back it up. The other team can stand up and raise their hand and wait to be called on by the speaker to be able to make a quick 15-second question or statement that the person speaking has to answer before they go back into the rest of the speech. But speakers, good news is that you don't have to answer you don't have to take the POI. You can wave someone down or tell them no thank you and continue on with your speech, so that you can have your speech and take the questions when it makes sense for you. And also, for the speaker, the first and 7th minute, so the first and last minute of the speeches are protected. So you can't ask POIs during this. But in that big middle chunk of the space of the speech, the other team can stand up and offer or try to ask a POI. This can only happen during the first 3 speeches of each team, so during those longer constructives, and not during the reply speech. In order to have really good engagement during the debate, we suggest that each team answers between 1 and 2 POIs. And their replies should be about 30 seconds, maybe 45 if it needs it. So you are speaking, someone asks a POI that you take, you answer their POI, and then you jump right back into your speech wherever you left off. Questions about any of this? Okay, a question that actually I realized that I did not put in here, but I think is really important is, can I bring notes or research into the debate? And the answer is yes. And we encourage you to do that. It is totally okay to have either printed out research or handwritten notes coming that you bring into the debate, and also that you are creating while the debate is happening. So we'll have it also on Monday as the second half of that debate seminar. We'll have a specific way for you to take notes, which is called flowing, that helps you to keep track of the debate. Because after 8 minutes, it's almost impossible to know what the other team has said during that whole time without taking notes. So in the debate, you are taking notes in a specific way that helps you to respond to what the other team has said and make sure that you're bringing up your most important arguments as well. To talk a little bit about scoring, because again, this is a competition and somebody has to win. How it works is that depending on if there's 1, 2, or 3, or maybe more judges in the debate, each judge will submit a score of the debate, and the team with the most points wins. Each speech gets its own score. So each speaker or debater will have their own score at the end of each debate. And not necessary for you to really study this too much, but it's evaluated based on things called style, content, and strategy. We're not going to go too far into it because this is not the most important thing when you're learning how to debate, but just knowing that there is something the judges are trained to look for, and you'll learn more about this later with your coaches and maybe at future seminars. So good news, it's 6:58, which means my timing was great, but are there any questions that you guys have before I wrap up the seminar? Okay, then let's talk about some important dates that are coming up. First, the motions and the tournaments. As I mentioned, the Fall West tournament is the 11th through the 13th of November, and this is going to be held in Blagoevgrad. And the Fall East tournament is the 25th through the 27th of November in Burgos. So we can't wait to host you for in-person tournaments yet again. The motions in the topic areas for the West tournament are going to be released sometime this weekend. So keep an eye out for it on our social media pages and from your coaches. If you don't already, please follow us on Instagram. I think it's Best Foundation, on Facebook, same name, and YouTube. And I think now we even have a TikTok. So be sure to follow to keep up to date on all the important information coming up. And then the motions for the Fall East tournament will be released, I think 2 weeks after this. So by the end of the month. The topic areas I didn't mention before, for the impromptu debates, we don't leave you hanging out to dry, but we will tell you the general topic area that you will be debating for those impromptu motions. So you can maybe do a little bit of research or just at least start thinking about what you might discuss for the impromptu debates. Upcoming seminars, as I said, on Monday, we are going to have a workshop about how to give the reply speech and how to flow with our lovely Borko. That is Monday at 8 p.m. I would say that this is a pretty advanced lecture. So if you are just getting used to debate, maybe hold off for a second unless you want to challenge yourself and watch some of the other ones and catch this recording later. But everybody is welcome. Then on October 24th, I will hold my classic motions briefing, which is where I talk about the motions that we have for the upcoming tournaments. So both the West and the East tournaments, break them down and give you some guidance on how to interpret them. Additional resources that you can check out, one are recordings. I did like 5 seminars last year or something like that most of them are recorded and are on our YouTube page. So I can link that and I'll put it in the Facebook event page so you can read those. Listen to those if you want. Particularly what I would recommend now is this speaker roles lecture that I have on the YouTube channel, which is basically going more in depth about what each speech is and what you should be doing for them. Also, what your coaches should be aware of there are debate case outlines that I've created to help you to kind of structure your first and second speeches that I hope will make it a little bit less stressful as you put together your arguments for either side. I also will try to have those up on the website soon. And you can always reach out to me. You can email me at my personal email address right here or at the info@bestfoundation.bg. If you have any questions or need to chat about something, I am totally here for you. That is the end of our first seminar. I hope to see you in the future, and I definitely recommend that you check out the recordings on the YouTube page. I'm going to put the link to that in the chat now so that you can check it out immediately. And yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to stick around in case anybody has additional questions that they'd like to answer, like me to answer. So thank you all so much. I can't wait to see most of you in person, and happy debating.